Since I get asked about it about 75 times a day, I figure I'd make a quick video showing you sort of where I'm at with this LS2 911 Holley install project. I've made a few videos kind of before this one, so if you want to see anything that happened up to this point, you can go back and check those out. But I figure for this, we'll start at the very front of the car, work our way back, and just kind of go over everything. I made myself a sweet list here so we don't forget anything. All right, all the way here at the front of the car, we have this MSD solid state relay. It's a 4-channel deal. Throughout this process, I asked Holley if there was anything that they wanted me to put on this, kind of like to show off, to help them sell or whatever, however that works. And this was one of those things. I have actually not used one of these before, and it seemed pretty cool, so I figured out why not. And I have, on the main engine harness where we have the 4 input and the 4 output all on the one connector, I ran that from the ECU to the front of the car. The inputs stopped inside of the car, and we'll get to that in a second, and then all 4 of the outputs went to the front of the car, which are all going to this MSD thing. And the 4 channels, I have fuel pump going to 1, radiator fan low speed going to 2, and then radiator fan high speed left on 1, and then high speed right on 1. This way, one, it's gonna cover all of the different current draws for all the different devices without overloading anything. And then I can stagger the high speed fans so they're not kicking on at the same time and causing any type of, I'm sure everyone's been in a car with a radiator fan kicks on and the lights go dim and it's annoying and stupid. So hopefully we can avoid all that. And then once we go to the inside of the car, the air conditioning is wired in conjunction with all of this. So the fans can turn on and off of whatever criteria I want: AC pressure, coolant temperature, speed, throttle position, blah, 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 no one cares. All these things are pretty cool because they are fused or circuit protected, I guess you could call it. Basically, if current draw gets too high, it'll just kill the whole circuit until you reset it, which is nice. And it has like LED lights so you can see what's going on there. And if I decide to put a, I don't know, like a PWM style fan or fuel pump or something on this later, then we have the ability to pulse and do what we want there. So these things seem pretty cool. Again, everything is on a connector, so sometimes it's nice just to be able to easily unplug the fuel pump and things like that when you're working on the car, so you don't have to worry about spraying yourself in the eyeball if you have a fuel line disconnected. So if we go a little further back into the cowl, this is where the factory battery location is. I kept the factory battery terminals and cables, just kind of no reason to start running stuff all through the car. It's good enough. This isn't some crazy high-tech spaceship car, so things are just kind of as nice as they need to be. Didn't really go over the top. I don't have the time to fool with making this as nice as I would like, unfortunately. Even getting up to this point now has been brutal because you get 5 minutes at a time to work on it. But so going directly to the battery, we have ECU power and ECU ground. And then from those two, kind of branch off to these little distribution blocks. And there's just some miscellaneous ground stuff. And then the power going to the MSD thing in the front is coming from this distribution block. The power steering is running to that, has electronic power steering on it. I'm not in love with the fuse holder thing that was on the car for the power steering when I got it. I'll replace that later with something a little nicer. And then from there, we have a big power wire going to the back of the car to another distribution block to control kind of all the other crap in the car. So during the process leading up to this, I actually managed to lose my wallet, which you can only imagine how stressful that was. Luckily, it was at my house. I guess when I was getting out of the car, it was monsooning outside, so sprinting like an idiot from my car inside, I guess somehow dropped my wallet and everything was ruined. So I had been talking back and forth with a company called Simply Carbon Fiber about doing some different things with this channel. And even though we haven't really come to any agreements on anything, they did send me their carbon fiber slim wallet. And I've been using this thing for probably 2 or 3 weeks now. And this thing is actually really cool. I did sort of have my doubts at first. I thought that since this thing just kind of like grasps all your cards and stuff, I thought that it would feel loose and like they're gonna fall out, but this thing, nothing's falling out of this. And you can hold a decent chunk of money in here too. And this thing is so much smaller than like my old standard wallet that I used, that it's just way nicer to keep in your pocket, especially now that cell phones are the size of miniature laptops. And if you look around on the site, they have all kinds of stuff: wallets, sunglasses, watches. They do have phone cases, which apparently I should have asked for one of those because mine's been halfway broken. Looks like it got bit by a shark. It's been like that for probably 2 years because I'm cheap. Car guys all seem to like carbon fiber, and the quality of this thing is spot on. You can hear how tight it is. It's easy to use. The actual finish of it's real nice. So I think this is, if you like carbon fiber and you want a small wallet and you're sick of carrying around a giant brick like I was for so long, definitely worth checking out. And I will put a link in the description to their website, and I believe they're offering a 10% discount if you use that link. So check that out. With that being said, any of the other stuff in this video that I think will be useful, I'll throw a link in the description of that below. If it's on Amazon, it's an affiliate link, I might make a quarter on it. And some of the other stuff like the leash electronics, I have no affiliation whatsoever. So it'll just be a direct link to their site. And if you find their stuff useful, go buy some crap. Okay, if we go inside the car, I had already mentioned that I ran the 4 inputs from the standard engine harness to the front of the car. So that's going to these 3 switches here, and then also this multi-position switch. Then I also ran 5-volt and sensor ground on another DTM connector to the front. So along with a handful of additional wires that will be pinned according to what they need to be as far as inputs and outputs go. So all this stuff is good. The AC is now wired in and functioning. That's the most important part of the whole thing. So I'm just sitting here drenched in sweat, as you can see. So I don't want to die in the car. I actually even really decided what I'm going to use the additional 2 buttons for, and then the multi-position switch. You can use that for several different things. So none of that is really set up and configured, but it is all wired and functional. This 8-position switch works as it should. So that's pretty cool. In the actual gauge cluster, the speedometer is untouched as far as it's still the Porsche wiring, go to the Porsche trans. The voltage gauge still works. The fuel gauge still works. I have run the wires from the factory coolant temp sensor and oil pressure sensor kind of over to where I can get to them. They're on DTM connectors. And I just need to run the wires from these big bulkhead connectors that you'll see when we get to the inside of the car. I just need to kind of connect the dots on those 4 or 5 wires, whatever those are. So it's almost done. So the only thing I think that I really need to still figure out that I haven't looked into yet is getting the tach to work. When the GM ECU was in the car, the tach did work. It was off by like 2,000 RPM, so it moved, but it was pretty much useless. And I think that's like the last thing I really need to figure out. I haven't looked into it yet. So the Holley has a tach output, which is set up for, you know, an 8-cylinder, and the Porsche clusters for a 6-cylinder. So I don't know if that's going to work. I don't know if I'm going to need to get like some sort of converter, or if I'll be able to use like a PWM output and customize it for 6-cylinder output. I don't know. I just haven't looked into it yet. So that's the last thing I got to figure out there. And then last thing up here is that we have the Pro Dash, obviously. I mounted it down in the center console. 1, because the center console is stupid and useless on this car. 2, a 12-inch dash wouldn't fit in the factory cluster, and then the 686 dash is just kind of small. I think it looks out of place, especially in a cluster like this. There isn't a flat surface to mount it on. You have all this kind of individual gauges, and I don't really spend too much time looking at that unless I need to. Like, I'd rather just have a big factory tach, a big factory speedometer in the gauge cluster for kind of day-to-day stuff, and then I can glance over at the dash if need be. Oh, and then there's also female USB port for the ECU, and then for the Pro Dash itself. So that way we can just plug cables in when we need them and don't have cables draped all over the car. If you don't have these and you just literally have a cable permanently plugged in the ECU and flopping all around the car, it's annoying as all hell. So this might be something to look into. I like it a lot, and it's cheap. Oh, and the last thing I haven't done inside there that I want to do, at least for now, I'm sure I'll continue to add stuff, but I'm going to wire in a clutch switch. The factory clutch switch sucks balls. It's like right at the very top of the pedal. So if you've ever wired anything to one of those style clutch switches, what happens is your foot just kind of, you know, say you're getting ready to shift, your foot will just kind of like rest on the pedal a little bit, and it'll activate the limiter, and then you're not expecting it, so you blow your teeth out on the steering wheel. It's annoying. So I'll probably mount some sort of a custom switch under there. There's no good place just to put like a pressure switch in line. Everything on this car is kind of really a pain to work on. So there's just a switch under the dash, that'll be fine. So if we move back a little bit further, we get to the ECU. So wiring a car is like 110% planning and then just doing the stuff. Considering I don't even know what I want to be in this car, planning hasn't really gone so well, as I've basically done no planning. So knowing that I'm not really doing any planning, what I tried to do is keep like the engine harness, so fuel pressure, oil pressure, like the actual core engine stuff, kind of in its own thing. And then as far as the connectors on the ECU, like J3 is for the drive-by wire. So I kept the other car stuff in there, like the air conditioning and the stuff that's, you know, kind of staying permanently with the car. And then connector J4 has inputs and outputs on it. So that's kind of going forward-ish. So that way for like a G meter or anything else inside the car or any of the additional stuff that I ran forward for future use, that can all be there. And then J2A and J2B are going to be for the additional things that are going to go into the engine compartment. As far as outputs, you know, got boost control solenoids and, you know, maybe a handful of things there, so not a whole lot. But as far as the inputs go, there's a whole bunch of stuff I know that I'm going to end up kind of putting into the car, but it's hard to sort of wire ahead of time for that when you don't know exactly what it is. So this Leash Electronics thing is actually pretty cool. Like if I knew exactly what I was going to do, I wouldn't use this. I would just wire it directly. So ultimately what happens here is we'll take pin J2A, take essentially all of the pins from that, sensor ground, 5 volt, 12 volt, and then all of the direct inputs, and they'll all go to this connector, and you plug this in. And then at that point, you have each one of your individual channels in one of these connectors. So that every one of these is wired for 5 volt sensor ground and all that. So now like each time you want to add a new sensor, you just run 3 wires right to this. You don't have to worry about splicing anything anymore. So this is going to go into that kind of that area that I cleared out where there isn't anything. And I might build a heat shield or something for it just so it's not getting bombarded with engine heat, since underhood temps on this thing is close to a trillion degrees. And in addition to all of that, I have another just terminal block for battery power. So everything is back there. Same thing for ground. And then I have a fuse block, again from Leash Electronics, just for like bigger amperage type stuff. Currently I don't have anything wired to it. I don't know if I ever will. I just tried to wire everything back there to where it's easy to get to if I ever want to add anything. And if kind of made everything nice and perfect and pretty for what's currently in the car, then when you go to add stuff later, it's kind of a disaster. So just trying to make things easy. And then I have another Leash Electronics board that's fused. It has like low amperage battery power, switched ignition power, and ground all in one place. So that's nice and convenient to use. Then I have a dual relay block where I have switched 12 volt power going to that, so that all of the switched 12 volt going to everything else in the car is all coming from a relay directly from the battery, rather than trying to run 100 different devices off of one little tiny switch 12 volt wire. And then the AC compressor is on the other side of that relay block. Those relay blocks are probably one of my favorite things that Leash makes. I like those things a lot. And then back here you can see these big bulkhead connectors. Those will get, they're kind of like just pulled to where I can get to them for right now. They get pushed in this big kind of space back there. So I just need to run the wires for the factory gauge cluster, plug it in, and then that stuff will be out of the way. And probably like the trickiest part about all this is, in order to get anything through the firewall, I need to take out like the seat belt, swirly, loopy, whatever the hell that thing's called. And you can't get your hands back there. And that thing's like a pain to take out. So I'm trying to just run everything that I can now so that I can put the seatbelt stuff back in. And then at that point, like everything will kind of be where it needs to go. So we don't have to run wiring all through the car and take everything apart 50 different times. All right, and back into the engine bay. Not a whole lot of excitement going on here. If you remember before, the steam ports were just factory stuff with some kinked up like metal lines that needed to be replaced. And I had an ugly rubber hose that was like kind of going this way and looped around and then went under the throttle body. And it was just kind of ugly. So nothing exciting there, just got a couple of AN fittings for the heads and then made some AN hoses. And it's still going back to this ugly kind of block of coolant stuff that I don't like. I don't have time to take care of this right now, but we'll make this look better later. It's using like just the factory ports on the water pump for the heat for the car. So it has kind of these harsh 90-degree hoses and the factory Porsche coolant bottle thing. It is what it is for kind of what's there, but I think we can make some stuff and make it look a little bit nicer. I still haven't done anything with the air intake. I refuse to use just the 90-degree coupler with the filter. So I need to order a couple of things. I think that might involve either one, taking the throttle body off, throwing it in the lathe, trimming it back, and then welding like a tight radius 90 to it. And if that's not tight enough, you might actually have to get a flange, bolt the flange to the intake manifold itself, weld a tight radius 90, and then move the throttle body over. I'm hoping I don't have to do that because it's just gonna be more work, but if that's what it takes not to use a silicone 90, then that's what it'll be. In the previous video, I showed where I cut off all of the nipples for vacuum hoses on the intake manifold, and then we drilled and tapped them for MPT fittings. So for the 1/4-inch one on the top of the manifold, that's just plugged for right now. We'll use that for the blow-off valves and fuel pressure regulator once we put the turbos on here. And then the 2 1/8-inch MPT fittings on the side. One is for the 3.5 bar map sensor, and then the other, I ordered a Rife 1/8-inch MPT air temp sensor. So that's going in there now. That ended up being the most expensive air temp sensor ever. I paid to have it expedited on shipping like an idiot. I don't even know why I did that. And then UPS couldn't deliver it, so they shipped it all the way back. And then I had to pay to ship it a second time. So thanks for that, UPS, buttholes. And then we have Holley, just oil pressure, fuel pressure, map sensor. Then over here on the side of the engine bay, cleared up some space. There was a bunch of connectors and brackets and just kind of relocated some stuff there. Now we have some open space, so that's where we'll mount this. Then anytime we need to add a sensor, it'll be 3 wires plugging in, good to go. Oh, this is more for the import guys as they use the heavy wall pipe manifolds, but our prototype billet collectors here, these things turned out awesome. The machine finish on these is great. They just look like they're polished. All right, what else we got? I think that's it. So it currently starts, it runs, it drives, injector dynamics, 1050X injectors. While I say it drives, I pulled it 7 feet into the parking lot to move some cars around and it didn't explode, so that is good. Haven't really spent any time at all tuning on it yet, other than just making it run. I think I changed a couple of things in the Excel enrichment, but I think once I wire this and maybe the tack signal, and then I want to do CAN bus 2 so I can input that into the dyno. Then at that point, it's basically ready to go onto the dyno, and it'll probably sit there for a month or two while I use it to, basically the whole purpose of this car is I'm using it to film my kind of second part of my Holley EFI training course. So if you have any interest in learning how to tune Holley EFI, there'll be a link in the description for that as well. So there should be a bunch of links in the description in this one, so go check those out.